Alright guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here, and I want to talk to you about a graphic novel that I recently read. Riven. This is a six-issue miniseries from Dark Horse Comics, I believe, written and drawn by Robert Tennell and Bo Hampton, with the art also by Bo Hampton. And this is the same creative team. They've worked together before on another creator-owned miniseries called Demons of Sherwood, which was kind of a supernatural Robin Hood story, if you're interested in that. And Bo Hampton, he and I believe his brother, Scott Hampton, they've also worked on stuff from DC Comics before. If you have the Batman trade paperback Other Realms, they worked together on one of those stories in that book. So if you think that name sounds familiar to you, that's probably where you've heard it before if you're a big Batman fan. So anyway, Riven, this is a six-issue miniseries, like I said, and it is a werewolf story that's also kind of a coming-of-age story about this girl. Basically, the story starts in, I think, 1997. This American couple goes to Romania to adopt this little girl because there's a whole bunch of orphans after this something. It's some historical event that happened in Romania in the mid-90s, and it resulted in there being a whole lot of orphan kids in Romania. And so people from all over the world who are wanting to adopt, suddenly they have the option of going to Romania to adopt a kid. And this American couple, they come and they adopt this girl, and something right off the bat is very wrong. And we see that the girl overnight seemingly has killed everyone in the room that she was sleeping in. And we later find out that's not exactly what happened, but something is definitely weird about this girl. And there's something not exactly right about this orphanage that she was in. And so we cut forward till about 10-ish years later, and this is right around the time when the girl is starting to hit puberty, and she falls off a bridge, and she is in a coma for the next 5 years after that. So that puts us more or less in the present day, and she comes out of her coma, and basically the rest of the story is partly her trying to adjust to life after missing 5 years, and also having to adjust to, spoilers, sort of being a werewolf. And I say sort of being a werewolf because she herself, she is not a full-blown werewolf. And this is where we get a little bit spoilery in this book. But we find out that before she was born, her dad was a werewolf. And so she's got a little bit of it in her, but not enough that she's actually transforming. But she has a telepathic bond with the other werewolf who's in this story. And that is a huge spoiler because for about 80% of this story, we are led to believe that her dad is hunting for her and searching for her. It turns out her dad has been dead for a little while. Her birth mother actually killed her dad whenever he was searching for their daughter. So he's been dead for a little while, but it turns out she has a twin brother that she didn't know about and nobody knew about. And he is a werewolf. His dad found him and turned him into a werewolf right around the time when she fell into a coma. And so there's this little subplot where every 30 days, her brain activity kind of spikes, and the doctors keep saying, this is impossible, she's in a coma, that shouldn't even be happening. It's because she has a telepathic bond with her brother, so every time he becomes a werewolf, her brain activity spikes, and that's kind of what's going on there. And so the story then kind of culminates with the brother. He has basically gone through all this process trying to kidnap her so that he can transform her into a werewolf, and then in his own sick, twisted way, he thinks that his family can then be together again, just him and her out hunting as werewolves. And so then the rest of the story is her actual family, the adopted family, trying to save her. And I really like this story. I feel like it tries to do quite a bit. I'm not necessarily convinced that it actually succeeds on every level. I don't think that this is a 100% success story, but if anything, I really love it just for trying. I'm a big fan of Robert Tennell's stuff anyway. He's done a few other stories that I've read, and I'm familiar with him via another guy who does a lot of creator-owned stuff, Mark Wheatley, and those guys are kind of operating in their own little corner of the creator-owned universe. And almost everything that I've read from them and their whole little group that they have that they work with, almost everything that I've read from them, I really enjoy, even if it's not 100% good. It may be a story that it doesn't necessarily work on this level or that level, but I usually come away enjoying those stories. And that's what I had with Riven. Number one, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some problems that I had with this story. Number one, I feel like the whole thing is kind of a metaphor for a teenager kind of coming into their own as a person. And in that way, it kind of reminds me of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. If you ever watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, especially if you ever watched any of the extra features surrounding that show, like documentaries or panels at conventions or commentaries on the DVDs, you could not get away from them talking about how the whole show was basically a giant metaphor for problems that teenagers go through. If you're a teenage girl and your mom is single and then she starts dating this dude, naturally you're not going to be okay with her dating this dude. You're not going to think that he is good enough for your mom. And so they did an entire episode about that, only instead of him just being a normal dude that the teenage girl is not okay with, he's an evil robot. They did stuff like that, where a vampire isn't necessarily just an evil vampire. He might be the older boy, and when you sleep with him, then he's not exactly what you thought, and then you regret that. There's all kinds of teenage problem metaphors going on there, and I kind of felt like that was what was going on with Riven. This whole story really, to me, felt like the werewolf part is kind of a metaphor for puberty and, you know, growing up, and it deals with that quite a bit for the first 2/3 of the book, but then in the last couple of issues, it really kind of gets away from that and it becomes much more of a standard werewolf story where the twin brother has basically arranged for this girl to be kidnapped, sort of, and then he wants to turn her into a werewolf, and then the family has to come and save her. It really gets away from this premise of the werewolf equals puberty and becoming a teenager and becoming adults. It really kind of gets away from that whole metaphor towards the end of the book. And I'm not sure if there is a way that this story could have avoided that, because when you have a werewolf on the cover of your story, it's really hard to just get away from doing a werewolf story. They advertise this as being a werewolf story, and so you're going to have to do some werewolf elements in your story, even if for the first 2/3 of the story, the werewolf stuff was barely even present. It was much more of a story about this girl trying to grow up and trying to deal with the fact that she has 5 lost years, and she's basically 5 years behind. She's sort of a 14-year-old in an 18 or 19-year-old's body. And not really, because she doesn't act like she's 14 here, but she definitely feels a little bit lost. She feels like she's lost some of her life because she has. And so, in a way, she is kind of like a 14-year-old in a 19-year-old's body, although she adjusts pretty quickly. And speaking of this whole story kind of sort of being a coming-of-age story disguised as a werewolf story, I feel like in places it kind of touches on this idea of the werewolf equals growing up and kind of finding out who you're going to be. It kind of touches on that in places, but then it kind of pulls back on it and says, no, we're going to do something else with that. For example, there's one part where this girl, she's found this guy that she thinks she has a crush on, and he's her tutor, and at one point she says, hey, let's pull over here. And then she takes off her shirt, and she's topless, and she's like, hey, join me. And he's like, I don't know. And then later on in the story, the book is trying to tell us that this was not necessarily her fault, that she kind of goes through these moments where she's not really herself, and that's when she's kind of telepathically bonded with her twin brother, who is a werewolf. And it tries to pull this off as these moments aren't really her fault, and anytime she does something like this, like she wants to get naked with a dude in 20-degree weather, or she wants to have sex with another dude out in an alley, it wants to pull this off as it's the werewolf's fault, and it's not really her fault. And I really felt like this story would have felt more natural and organic if it had been her fault. She is a 14-year-old girl who is probably just learning about stuff like sex when she went into a coma for 5 years. And now she's 19, and she wants to get out there and sow her wild oats, and she wants to experience all of this stuff that she hasn't gotten to experience for the last 5 years. And I really thought it made more sense that all these things that she does, like wanting to get with the tutor and getting with that dude in an alley, I really feel like all those things that she does would have made more sense if they had been her consciously making these decisions. Instead of saying, no, that wasn't her, that was the werewolf taking over. Instead of doing that, I think it would have worked better if this had just been her making some really poor decisions. Saying, you know what, I know that I don't even know this dude, and I know that my best friend was hitting on him, but I'm going to have sex with him out in an alley, and then finding out, oh wait, that wasn't really a good decision. That was a bad idea. This is what being a teenager is all about. Making choices and then finding out sometimes that these aren't the choices that you needed to make, that you really shouldn't have done that thing, you really shouldn't have said that. Finding out that you make mistakes and then you deal with those mistakes and you move on, that's part of growing up. And I thought that was where they were going with this character. I really thought that they were having her try and just experience all this stuff that she didn't have a chance to experience for 5 years, and then just kind of trying to get it all out in the open and trying to experience it all at once. I thought that's where they were going with the character, and then they sort of do a cop-out by saying that it's a supernatural thing that's going on, and she's not really to blame for all that stuff. And I felt like that made the story a little bit weaker, but at the same time, maybe that works better with this whole idea of being a teenager and growing up equals being a werewolf. Maybe it works better with all of that, although I still think it weakens the story. That's just me personally. Speaking of this character, the main character, I feel like she is the best, most fleshed out character in this story. All the other characters, all the side characters here, I really don't feel like they are fleshed out at all. The tutor, the one that I mentioned, he is very flat, very one-dimensional, and there are two moments that I feel like the book realizes that he is flat and one-dimensional, and so they try to create these scenes to flesh him out and make him seem like he's more of a three-dimensional character, but it really just feels like they're saying, and also, he's been an alcoholic for the last 5 years of his life, and then they don't ever mention that again. There's like this 2-page speech that this guy goes through about how since he was 13 he's been an alcoholic, and then after that it's not mentioned anymore. It doesn't really do anything to flesh out his character. His character is not made more interesting or made more three-dimensional by this speech. It's just kind of, it's there, and then they ignore it for the rest of the book. And then also, about 2/3 of the way in, the main character accuses him of being gay. And I'm assuming that he is gay, because they don't actually come out and have him say, no, I'm not, I just didn't want to have sex with you in 20-degree weather when you were acting really strange. I'm assuming that he is gay, and that she was right about that, but then they don't really do anything with that for the rest of the book. They don't have any exploration of what that would be like. If you're 14 and you went into a coma 5 years ago, and then you come out of a coma and you find out that this guy is gay, I have a feeling that you would react to that very differently than somebody who wasn't in a coma for the last 5 years. And they don't really explore that at all from her perspective or from his perspective. He is a very one-dimensional character. He doesn't really get a whole lot to do here. He's just one of the supporting characters who comes to save her at the end of the story. And then even worse than him is her best friend since kindergarten, who gets absolutely no characterization at all. She's just the best friend who's known her since kindergarten, and she's there with her when she falls off a bridge at the beginning of the story, and then when the girl comes out of a coma and she asks for her best friend again, she comes back into the story. But if you asked me to describe this girl, to tell you anything about her, I couldn't do it. I couldn't tell you what her personality is, anything about her character traits. I couldn't tell you what she enjoys doing, her hobbies, stuff like that. I couldn't tell you because this book doesn't bother to do anything with its character. It doesn't really do anything with any of the characters except for the main girl. The main girl, I feel like it does a really good job getting into her head and showing us what it's like when you come out of a coma for this long and then you're trying to get back into life. It shows us what it's like to do that from the perspective of a 19-year-old girl who the last time she saw herself, she was 14. You know, it shows us what it's like to do that, and I really get the feeling that these people, they really got inside the head of this character, but then they kind of slacked on all the other characters. They really didn't bother trying to flesh out any of these other characters, and that's unfortunate because like I said at the beginning of this video, I really enjoyed this book. This was a lot more enjoyable than I thought it would be, and I really didn't have any negative expectations going into this book, but I just enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. So those are my thoughts on Riven by Bo Hampton and Robert Tennell. I hope that you guys liked this video, and I hope that I was able to maybe get you guys interested in reading the book. Maybe not. Maybe you heard my video and you said, that's okay. But I hope that you were at least interested in this video, and I was able to get you guys thinking about something. If you did like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys later in the week with some different kinds of videos. So take care, and I'll see you then. Have a great rest of the day.